All right. And again, welcome to the first series in our first learning opportunity in our series of Learn, Love, Livingston, a dive into diversity, advocacy, economy, and empowerment. We are from the Livingston Diversity Council, and the idea behind this online series was generated through one of our very active subcommittees that involves the board of the Diversity Council as well as members of our community. And so I want to thank our board as well as our committee, our training committee, for putting this all together. I also want to thank Jennifer Tate, who is our speaker today. I'll be introducing her shortly, for jumping on and being our first in this series. We're really very excited to be here with you. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes for a few housekeeping items and to talk a little bit about the Livingston Diversity Council, and then we will dive right in with Jennifer. So, as I said, this event is being put on by the Livingston Diversity Council. We also want to make sure that we take an opportunity to thank our Champion for Change partner, which is St. Joseph Mercy Livingston Health System. St. Joseph Mercy Livingston has joined the Livingston Diversity Council for 2021 as our Champion for Change partner by financially sponsoring and supporting our efforts through donation as well as through their Diversity and Inclusion Council at the hospital. So we want to thank St. Joseph Mercy Livingston for making this possible. A little bit of history on our Livingston Diversity Council. A lot of times folks are a little surprised to know that we have a Livingston Diversity Council, and they're even more surprised when they learn that we've been around since 1987. I, of course, was really little then, so I wasn't around involved in that time. I didn't join until 2010, but a lot of really great work has been happening since 87, and lots of great history there. And we are who we are today due to all of that history and all of that incredible conversation and efforts that were made by the initial citizens that started the Diversity Council in an effort to address issues that were happening around racism and hatred in Livingston County back in '87. And so just a little bit about us. It is our mission to be a change agent for diversity, equity, inclusion, and access that educates, collaborates, and empowers to build a thriving community. We all know that we can benefit from diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And we know that it will make us all better when we can engage with each other and learn from each other. Our vision is that Livingston County will be a transformative community that embraces and empowers all people for their uniqueness and contributions. We know that vision is usually something that is kind of an end result, but we also know that with diversity, equity, and inclusion work, it's really important to know and realize that we're never going to arrive. We're never going to be woke. We're never going to know everything. And so the vision is tough, because the vision is supposed to be when all things are done, right? And the work is never done. But as we work together and we transform together, it takes that courage to be that transformative community, and being willing to consistently look at ourselves, at our community, how we're doing things and how we can do better. So that is a little bit about the Livingston Diversity Council. All right, next, just a little bit, if you want to learn more about the Livingston Diversity Council, please visit us on our website, livingstondiversity.org. You can email us at livingstondiversitycouncil@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram with @LivingstonDiversity. So please make sure to follow us on social media, interact with us. Lots of great things going on. We'd love to hear from you. Today, we are, like I said, recording the session, and so this will be available on our YouTube channel. We don't have an evaluation set up, but I would love to hear any general feedback from you all. So if you have any thoughts, things that you really liked, things that you'd like to see changed about this series as we move forward throughout the year, please feel free to email us at livingstondiversitycouncil@gmail.com with your thoughts on that. We'd really appreciate it. All right, so without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for today. And so we have Jennifer Tate, who is the director for the Livingston County Department of Health and Human Services. She's also a member of our board of directors for the Livingston Diversity Council. She joined us in May of last year, and our board members serve 3-year terms. So we got her at least until 2022. So we very much appreciate Jennifer jumping on and joining us today, and really kicking us off with some foundational knowledge and some foundational conversation about cultural awareness. So I'm all set. You can go ahead and switch the screen share. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody, and enjoy.
Good morning, everybody. As Nicole already stated, my name is Jennifer Tate, and I'm here to facilitate a conversation today around cultural awareness. So one thing that the Livingston Diversity Council has been doing is trying to educate our community and just kind of begin those tough conversations. We know that what is needed is a change, and we need to start that by including diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so one of the ways we're going to do that today is talk about cultural awareness. So before we get started, one of the things that I want us to do is kind of just set some ground rules. First and foremost, if you can just keep your phones on mute or your computers if you're not talking or if you don't have questions, if you can ensure that we are utilizing active listening skills. We will have some tough conversations, and we just want to make sure that everybody feels that they are in a setting where they can share their thoughts and we can continue to move forward. So one of the main objectives of today's session is for us to understand how our own culture and upbringing can impact our current jobs, our roles in the community, or our responsibilities. And so I want you to know that this session is totally, I want to hear from you all, okay? We're going to engage, we're gonna have a conversation, and hopefully what you will get out of this at the end of our conversation is that you will be aware of different cultures. You'll understand the socialization piece. We'll be able to understand we will actually be able to increase our participation and our ability to work effectively with people from different cultures. Because I think one of the things that is most important is that although we're working in communities and we're going to continue to see people or sit next to people who may not look like us, who may have different theories or different responses. And I think that the most important piece that we can do, what we can do as a community, is to make sure that we educate each other. And how we start to do that is to ensure that we have the ability to understand and be aware of different cultures. So next screen, what you'll see on here is just the very beginning of where we want to get started. I'm just trying to get this off my screen because it's taken away from what I want to do. So we've set our ground rules, and if anybody wants to add anything, feel free. But I want us to first just talk a little bit about what we think culture is, right? Culture is the way of life of different groups of people. So what we're talking about is different characteristics. We want to ensure that we have the knowledge of different groups. So for example, we know that there are different languages that people will speak. There's going to be different social habits that will occur. People have different religions. And so those are the pieces that we want to make sure we understand, because if you are not familiar with other cultures or unfamiliar with their way of life, then one thing that happens, people begin to have conversations, and obviously others are automatically on defense. So that's where the awareness piece comes in. And in regards to awareness, we want to make sure that we have knowledge or perception of the facts about different cultures, right? Not things that we've heard, not myths or perceptions. We want to make sure that we have a good understanding of what may offend people, the specific titles that they would like to be addressed by, if we're speaking to different ethnic groups, sometimes we get confused on what type of wording we want to utilize to be able to identify those different ethnic groups. So whether if it's an African American person talking, or if we want to actually utilize the word Black, or if it's Caucasian, or we're going to utilize the word white, we want to make sure that we understand where people are coming from, what the differences may be, and what is actually going to help us move forward to understand and be aware of different cultures, and at the same time include everyone and treat everyone the same as we continue to provide this education. So what I want to do today is start by facilitating some conversation around questions in regards to messages that we received. Because one thing that we do know in regards to cultural awareness is that the way we are brought up, the things that we are taught as children, the messages that our parents share with us definitely has an effect on the way that we interact with others from different cultures. So one of the first questions states, what were some messages I got growing up from my parents about being a member of an ethnic group? So one of the important messages, and that's just a question I want you all to think about because I want to hear your responses. And so I want to just take a step back and explain how this will work today. We'll put the question up here, we'll pose the question, then we will change our screen so that you have the ability to write answers on a whiteboard. This is so that we don't know who the individuals are that have those responses, because we want to have the best conversation that we can. We want people to be true and share the information that actually happened as they were growing up and help them develop the awareness that they currently have of different cultures. So when you see the whiteboard as now, I'd like you to write what some of your responses are in regards to that question, the first question. And while you guys are writing, I'll share an experience. And Courtney Smith-Atkins, who's my program manager, also who's co-facilitating today and running our technology, will actually read some of the responses that we receive on the whiteboard, and then hopefully it'll generate some conversation in regards to our understanding of why our community thinks and acts in the manner that they do today. And so when I think about conversations or messages that my parents actually had with me about being a member of a specific ethnic group, the one thing that stands out to me is that they stated that being a minority, one of the things that I am going to have to do is ensure that I work extra hard in order to achieve some of the things that I would think may come just because of my education or the different certificates or the knowledge, experience that I've had. They made it known to me from the very beginning that what I'm going to have to do is work triple time just to be able to even be in the race. And I thought that for me, it was a little difficult in the beginning because I look at people just for who they are. And that was one of the main messages that my parents gave me as well, because growing up in a biracial home, I felt like I had the best of both worlds. I thought that I would have the ability to interact with individuals of different cultures, that it would make it easier because I understood my mom is Caucasian and my dad is African American. So that afforded me the ability to be able to understand at least those two specific cultures, right? And so one of the things that I thought was I would be prepared to handle any situation, be able to interact with any given individual in any given setting. And by me having that open mindset and having the ability to understand, because I would go with, for example, if we talk about holidays and celebrations, right? And we're trying to understand and embrace different cultures. We would spend half a day of the holiday with my mom and my mom's extended family. So that would mean that my sister, brother, myself, and my dad were the only minorities that were going to be at this family dinner, but it was great. We were never treated differently. The main things that were different may have been the meal, some of the conversation, or other things that we talked about. And then when we would go to the second half of the day, then that would be with my father. And everyone there was minority. They were African Americans, and the only person that wasn't was my mom. But she was never treated any differently. So that is how I was raised, that you treat people how you want to be treated, and that you understand the things that may offend them. And in the event that you don't understand it, or they have taken the time to tell you that they've been offended, then that's something that we need to look at and figure out, where can we go from here? What can I do on the next occasion that I'm interacting with individuals from different cultures? And what are some of those key words that I need to remember to let them know that I understand? It doesn't mean that I'm putting myself in their predicaments, but what it does mean is that I've taken the time to understand and embrace your culture and figure out what it is. Number one, the wording that you would like me to use when I am addressing you, and why the wording that maybe I thought was okay to utilize, maybe that perception is not one that I want to put out there. So I want to just kind of take a look and see if you all had maybe some different experiences and what that looks like. I do see one on the whiteboard that said I was taught to be open-minded regarding different cultures. However, I was never given the opportunity to interact with different cultures. And I think that is such an important piece, because we can practice, we can talk about the things that we're going to do, we can think that we are all set, but then when it comes to the point of engagement with people from other cultures, then sometimes I know, just for myself, I find myself being nervous. And there's no given reason for that other than the unknown, and wondering if people will accept me the same way that I'm going to accept them, just because the color of my skin, or maybe the wording that I utilize, or maybe we're talking about their perception, or maybe it was just a challenging interaction that they had with a person of color. And now that is their perception in regards to people of color. But whenever you're talking about culture, we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, the main piece is that we need to ensure that we understand and we're aware of what their culture, what the factual things are about their culture, and not what the perception is. So another thing I see on the whiteboard is we were advised to avoid certain areas that were thought to be populated by certain ethnicities. And I think that's across the board, right? Whether you're African-American or Caucasian, Hispanic, that was one thing that was always taught, regardless of what your culture is. You may not want to go into these specific areas because there's going to be people that look different from you, and the perception is that these are not safe areas because of the way that they look. What I want you all to think about today is, as we're talking about these questions and talking about the messages that we received as children growing up, is how can this help or hinder the work that we're doing, or the work that we want to see, not only within our own communities, but within communities that we will engage with. We're going to collaborate with many different people on many different levels. And what we want to do is make sure that we have positive experiences, because one of the main things that we can walk away from this conversation today with is that experience is what helps us develop our perceptions or our biases in regards to our thoughts, as well as the things and messages that we were taught as we were growing up. And that's the outcome that I want us all to be able to get today when we're finished having this conversation. is that we have to recognize and realize that our upbringing definitely has a huge piece to do with in regards to our thought process and the biases that we have developed, our interaction with others. Because if you're coming to the table and you're saying that you're open-minded for whoever is going to be at that meeting and you're going to be able to engage with those individuals, then you can't come to the table with those perceptions. Okay. And you have to recognize that you do have those perceptions. And those are things that we need to work on, because when we are in the community, the one thing we don't want to do is express our own personal biases. And we have to be in tune with those biases and the things that we have going on so that we can better understand what's going on and where we need to start and the messages that we feel we need to communicate within our community to ensure that we do see the change that we are advocating for. All right, so our next question is, what are some of the messages you got growing up from your parents about poverty and people who receive assistance? And I think that this was always a tough conversation, right? Because everybody's not eligible to receive assistance. Those who are at the poverty level definitely need that assistance, but we also know that there's times when individuals take advantage of the system. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're being fair, that we're listening, that we understand why people are in poverty and how we can help them become self-sufficient so that it's not a lifelong event for them. We want them to continue to be able to gather things, information in regards to ways they can become self-sufficient. We want to provide them with resources so they have the ability to be able to see the change themselves. I know for me growing up, one of the main messages that my parents communicated to me is that assistance should be available to those who need it, right? But it should not be a lifelong thing. And so kind of to sum that up, my parents thought that it was generational, right? So people who were on welfare, it was a generational thing and it's a learned behavior. So they understand that that's the way of life, right? That poverty, if you don't make the money you want to be able to make, if you're not in that specific economic background, and you need to ensure that you put yourself in a position to be able to be successful and be able to move forward. So I did learn that that is not at all how it is. It is generational. I think that people do learn, but if they're given the ability to learn and they're made aware of different things that they can do and different resources, that people want to be better. I see one more on the whiteboard. Oh, it kind of scrambled it. Does anybody maybe want to share, just kind of talk about the messages that you got from your parents growing up about poverty and people receiving assistance? One on here is that it was okay for a while, but in the end, people have the capacity to change their situation if they want to. Those that don't are lazy. And I think that is a great response, because it's so true, right? People often communicate that information saying that, oh, people who receive assistance are lazy, but we don't take the time to figure out why they're in that predicament. What was the change in their circumstance that made them go to the level of being below poverty, right? And we need to understand that everybody doesn't have the same motivation. Everybody doesn't have the same support. They don't have the same goals. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we don't use terms and we're not labeling people because we don't understand that. Because growing up, my family, we didn't receive assistance, but we weren't taught to look down on those who did. But at the same time, we did judge. right? And that's a tough thing for us to sit back and be able to realize that it's difficult to look at others or hear about things that they're doing. And if it's different from what we're doing, we automatically think there's got to be something wrong with that choice, right? And it's not always because we just don't agree with it, it's because we don't understand. And you have to put yourself, you have to utilize empathy. You have to put yourself in other people's shoes so that you can understand why it is that they're in this predicament, what choices they can make, and provide them with the education and the knowledge to be able to move forward. We have another response that says, my family encouraged me to give those who don't have much because we are able to give back. And that is important as well, because you have to recognize and know what your role is in the community. We cannot always be takers. We have to find areas where we are givers. And you have to understand where people are coming from, what are the resources that we're lacking. For example, coming here to Livingston County, I probably had came to Livingston County a total of 4 times in my entire life. And that was because I was stopping in at the DHS office and we were rolling out new programs. So I was in and out. So the things that people would share in regards to maybe some of the challenges that I would see coming to Livingston County, I overlooked that. I didn't listen to people. I came in with a positive mindset. And what I found was that some of the things or perceptions that people were warning me about or wanted to ensure that I was safe, those were definitely some of the things that are some of the situations that I was actually put in. And as I stated in the beginning, I thought that I had this, right? I thought that I was going to be able to handle any situation at any given time, and it was only going to be a positive manner, and that we wouldn't experience some of those things that were discussed with me. A couple other messages that I see on here is that the whole bootstrap story without noting the intergenerational issues that you mentioned. And I think those things are most definitely important, because it's so hard to change our way of thinking if the way we were brought up is total opposite of the way we want to interact with individuals now. And so you're going back and forth with what your parents told you and the person that you're becoming because of your interaction with people in the community, or maybe not in the community. Because one thing that we know, Livingston County is working on becoming a diverse community, right? And so we have some people who are on board, some people who are open and willing to listen and learn. And those are just some of the things that we want to make sure that we're in tune with prior to maybe given what our perception is or having those conversations. And that's why it's important to identify individuals who come from different backgrounds than you, who are a different culture, so that you can ask those questions and you can understand where it is that you need to be educated in order to continue to have positive conversations with other people. And the most important thing that we need to know is that we all have biases. And the first time that I heard that word and it was expressed to me that, that's a bias that you have. And that wasn't something that I agreed with. Because one of the misconceptions I had was that if I did have a bias, that I'm a terrible person. And I do have prejudices and that's basically what biases are, right? Biases are prejudices in favor of or against one thing. So whether we're talking about a person, a group of people, we're generally comparing 2 different people or 2 different things in regards to our own feelings. And generally when we're talking about our biases, we present things in the manner that we want people to understand, or we want people to agree with us, right? So one of the things I was trying to think of some controversial issues in regards to biases to give us a great understanding. And one of the things that I came up with is that, or one of the examples was, for example, if we're talking about biases, and we know that biases are often based on how we were raised, right? So an example of a bias in the community that we can think about would be O.J. Simpson, right? He was one of the most high-profile trials in the 20th century, right? And he was acquitted for murder, but although he was acquitted, many people still treated him as if he was a convicted murderer, right? And we came up with those conclusions, or we had those biases because we were our own judge and jury, right? We saw all the evidence, we made our own determination, and regardless if he was acquitted or not, our biases did not allow us to not see him as a murderer or treat him as one. And so that is something that's difficult. And I know there's still so many different views when we're talking about having biases, or even when we go back and we look at the O.J. Simpson trial, right? I know it's always popped up in some form or fashion on the news and people are looking at it, or if there's similar situations, they always refer back, right? We're always back to that glove and those law enforcement officers and the way that they interacted. But what that did as well is allow people to develop biases against law enforcement, right? Because now we see one person made a mistake. People make mistakes, but now we have to figure out that's just that individual. It's not law enforcement as a whole. It's not all white police officers are against African-American people, or all African-American law enforcement officers are against Caucasian people or Hispanics. And that's something that we need to be able to decipher between. When we're talking about and dealing with biases, we need to make sure that we have a total understanding of what's going on. What is it that we feel the community needs in order to ensure what we have going on is going to make sense? And how are we going to educate people so that when they are in specific predicaments or put into specific situations, that they take the time to sit back and make sure that they're aware, number one, of what the actual issue that's being brought to the table is. Because a lot of times when we come to the table and we're sharing information, we're collaborating and we're talking, and we have different opinions, sometimes you have to just be able to utilize active listening. And while you're utilizing active listening, one of those most important skills is to listen to understand. Because so often we listen and we're waiting for that person to finish so that we can respond, because we can't wait to correct them for what they're saying, or we just can't wait to get our point out, that we really didn't listen to what they had to say. So we couldn't fully understand, or we weren't even aware of really what the issue, the true issue was that's at hand, that we're talking about, or that we need to be addressing. And I just wanted us to be able to touch bases in regards to what biases are, because as we continue, as the Livingston Diversity Council continues to have these talks, conversations, meet and greets, we want to make sure that we have a full understanding from the beginning. And before we can begin to even talk about biases, we have to understand different cultures. You have to understand who's truly at the table and what does it mean. And if there are questions or concerns that people have, we want to be able to answer them. And we want to be able to have a forum where we can have these difficult conversations. Often when we are coming into a room and we have a specific race that may be the majority, then when we see people who are the minority in those situations, you'll see the individuals who want to see that change or want to see the engagement between the different cultures, and they're going to automatically reach out to the person who's the minority, or they're going to find themselves trying to maybe not only engage with that individual or people who don't look like them or have the same views as them. They're going to bring others to the table to try to introduce that person, or make sure that they understand the culture, or that they understand who that person is, regardless of what they look like, the color of their skin, or the way that they talk, the way that they wear their hair. And those are things that are most definitely important. And those prior to, I can definitely tell you, prior to coming to Livingston County, those were things that I didn't really pay attention to because of my upbringing. I was always taught to treat people the way that you want to be treated, and ensure that the information that you are utilizing to have a specific perception of those individuals that look different from you is one that has a standing, meaning that you have factual, knowledgeable information that is going to allow you to not only be aware and speak facts in regards to those other cultures, but you're going to be able to educate other people. And when people sometimes speak up, so for example, being a biracial minority here in Livingston County, it doesn't matter to me how people address me. I'm not worried if they're introducing me and they're saying that I'm a minority. Some people, because of the light pigment of my skin, may choose to identify me in a different racial category. And that's okay with me, because I would rather people just ask questions and be able to have those understandings in regards to different cultures. And if I can be the person to be able to share those experiences and educate people and answer the question, so that that tension when we all come to the table is removed and we feel comfortable, I think that number one, that's the beginning, that we're able to come together, we can have those tough conversations, and we can agree to disagree. And that's so important, especially when we're talking about the professional arena, or just coming to a new community and being able to engage with people. You have to figure out where people are and go from there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to allow Courtney to talk about our next question, and we'll get some information in regards to what were the messages you received while growing up about physical discipline.
Hi, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here with you today. I am so glad that you are all participating in this training. We have before us the whiteboard, and I'm wondering if we can type up there some messages you received from extended family, from your parents, from anyone while you were growing up about physical discipline. As we see, the reactions that some people have to physical discipline are different. Sometimes it's very normal practice for our Native Americans to use a process called cupping, which can be mistaken for physical discipline. It's not, it's a healing remedy. But when we see these perfect circles, sometimes it's like a suction with the cup, and it can look like an injury. So we have to talk about, what does physical discipline look like? What was okay when we were growing up? I can tell you when I was growing up, I was definitely knew what the belt was and what that meant, and was no stranger to the term, wait till your dad comes home. We've got some good feedback here on the whiteboard. If we misbehave, we were spanked. Spanking is okay. Yeah, be grateful that you didn't get the belt like they did. It's true, it's all true. All right. Okay, go ahead.
And I think one of the things that stood out for me was because my parents were so totally different. it takes a village to raise a kid, right? So any adult that was in your presence, if you acted up, it was okay for them to spank you, right? And you're like, what? Who are you? No, this is not what we do. But it was just having to adjust and go back and forth in regards to how they thought or the things that they felt. And so I think it's important. And even today, when we're working in regards to the work that we do here at the department, it's so important for all of our workers to understand the difference in regards to cultures and what their expectations are and their line of thinking, so that when we're out in the community and we're doing investigations in regards to child abuse or neglect, that we understand where they're coming from. So for me, coming into this arena and working in human services, it took some time to be able to adjust, because I understand that kids get spankings. That's just what happens, right? However, what we need to really pay attention to and look at is a spanking. What is a spanking? A spanking should not leave marks or bruises, right? Because that's considered excessive force. A spanking is, you're running. I would remember when it was time for us to get whoopings, the thing my dad would do, there was 3 of us, and he would say, okay, line up, right? And everybody's gonna get a spanking because we were not displaying the behaviors that they wanted us to. So one of the things that I would do, I would run to be first, right? Because I grew to know that if I go first, I'm gonna take about 4 or 5 and then I'm gonna run off, but he's not gonna make me come back because he's on to the next. If you're that last person, it might look a little different for you. So those were just some of the things that I learned about physical discipline and growing up. And I think that as we're looking at some of the messages here on this whiteboard, you can see that some people were the exact opposite, right? Physical discipline wasn't used in my home growing up. So how do we think that message, if that was the message we got growing up from our parents, and then we became a children's protective services worker, do you think that would help or hinder our work? And just from having employees, we've had this conversation. We've talked about this cultural awareness here within our own office within Livingston, and there's 80 employees, and we had so many different perceptions. But one thing that we all were able to agree on was the fact that most definitely your upbringing is going to have an effect. It can hinder you in some ways within your role within the community or your job. And it also may be helpful, because if you're going out on a physical abuse complaint, then really, do you understand about physical abuse, or what are the important things? But one of the most important things is that you're going to be able to offer a different avenue. You're going to be able to talk about different things, because if we didn't use physical discipline, then we probably have some resources, right? Whether it is talking about punishments or utilizing behavior modification, because those are the things that are important when we're dealing with kids, because we have to ensure that there is some type of structure. But what we don't want to do is put our own personal values or judge people or make them be on defense just because they have a different thought process or their experience has been a little different in regards to the experiences that they have actually come up with. All righty. So this is one thing that we thought about as we were engaging and talking about cultural awareness in the department. That's one of our goals this year, is to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of the work that we do. But the most important piece, again, is educating people and talking about it. So you have to understand how people grew up and the messages that were shared with them prior to being able to even start those conversations. Because generally, if the conversation of race, equity, or inclusion is brought up, it's kind of the elephant in the room, right? It's the conversation that people don't want to have, but it's the conversation that's necessary, because how do you educate yourself or others or even gain understanding of why people think the way they do, or why they display some of the actions that they do. And so if you look at the screen now, the next question you'll see here is, what were some of the messages I got growing up from extended family about marrying outside of my ethnic group? And then you'll see we'll have the whiteboard displayed so that you can write your messages. And feel free to know that as you're writing those messages, we don't know who the message is coming from. We just want to be able to understand the different messages that are out there so that we can discuss them.
And I just wanted to share for just a moment, while all of you are typing about the messages you received about marrying outside of your ethnic group. When I was younger, is what we'll say, there's a big movie that came out, and I wonder if anyone remembers Jungle Fever. Does anyone remember this? I couldn't watch it. I was too young, but I knew that the concept of this movie was an African-American and a Caucasian woman having a relationship together. And that's all I knew. And I remember it was very controversial. And I remember point blank asking my dad, because I was told to ask my dad, right? Because he was the decision maker. Dad, what's going to happen if I bring somebody home who you don't know and who's Black? What's going to happen? And he said, Court, don't worry about it. Whoever you bring home, they got to be a good person. And I'm telling you, it changed my life. It was a really great message. We had other strong messages about discipline and about poverty. But as soon as I heard that, it was really affirming. So that's my message, and I just wanted to share it because I just think, looking back, just the messages I received were so incredibly diverse and conflicting, and I could ask this person and they would give me one message and another person would give me another message. So it was, I don't know, it was amazing. Thank you. I'm seeing the whiteboard, it's great.
And I think some of the main message, because this is what we lived. So obviously my parents, the thing that they taught me was that the one thing I remember is you can't help who you love, right? So you love people for who they are, not what they look like, but that's not the perception of the majority, right? Because people think that maybe if you stay within your own culture, which was some of the thinking of my dad's side of the family, and I can say as well as my mom. So all of the time, me growing up and the messages that my parents were giving me, sometimes I would get those conflicting messages outside, but I really I couldn't engage, and I didn't understand those things because I was like, well, we're happy. You know, I see my parents have been married for 52 years. So I know that it works because they are able to come together and make it work. But what was so amazing to me was the stories that my parents shared of how tough it was for them going through this interracial marriage. So my mom, for example, she started dating my dad when she was 18. She was a senior in high school. Her parents didn't agree with that. So she was actually kicked out of her house at 18 and was trying to figure out life now because she chose a person from a different culture that people didn't understand. This just is not what we do. But at the same time, my dad's family looked at it from a different perspective. And that was in regards to, if you are going to date a Caucasian woman, you're going to put yourself in harm's way. Your safety is something that you are going to have to be aware of, because now you're going to stand out. When you go out, people are going to look at you. They're going to stare just because they don't understand. When my parents were in high school, they actually had drinking fountains for the whites, drinking fountains for the Blacks, African Americans. And one thing I remember being in high school and not understanding, my grandparents on both sides accepted me and both of my siblings. Okay, so I didn't understand when we would go over to my maternal grandparents' house, my dad couldn't go. And I couldn't understand because, as we see, the color of our skin was different from theirs as well. So if they could love me, why could you not love my dad? And actually what happened was, after time, they came around, and they did, because they got to know him as a person. I guess they saw us as kids. They said, well, our grandkids aren't terrible. They're not bad. So maybe we can kind of look at the differences and figure it out. But it's so important to understand that those are choices that people should be able to make, and we shouldn't judge them for the choice of the person that they want to be with. I see something on the whiteboard that says, even marrying outside of my religion was controversial. And I think that's so important. That's one of the things that we talked about in the very beginning, was learning about different religions and understanding them, and not going along with the perception of what others thought. The one thing that I did learn very quick at an early age was the difference between Catholic service, because my mom was Catholic and my dad was Baptist, in a Baptist service. So the one thing we knew was we had to go to church, okay, on Sunday. But my parents, they allowed us to choose. If we want to go to Catholic service, we can. And I jumped on board with the Catholic service. I learned it's a whole hour, right? Versus 15 hours being in a different one. So I was like, wait a minute, something's got to give. I need to figure this out. But, you know, if I was to sit up and talk about that, or if Courtney was, maybe because she looks different, people might look at her in a different manner, right? Like, how dare you think that about going to a Baptist church? Well, really, do they have that perception just because of the color of Courtney's skin? Because it is factual, right? Service is going to be an entire shift, and then you are going to come back for a second shift. So, you know, it's just kind of having that understanding. And sometimes, even in working in the arena that we work in, and I'm going to say everybody that's on here, because you're all engaging and collaborating with people in a community that may have different views, thoughts, or perceptions than you. And you just have to, sometimes, we usually say here in our office, sometimes you have to laugh to stop from crying, right? Because conversations can become so difficult. People, their upbringing has encouraged them to have specific thoughts, specific responses, and they're not open to that change. And I think that by growing up in a biracial home, that's one thing that it made me do. It made me be open to change, you know, and be flexible and understand the differences.
Yeah, amazing.
And we're new to this. This is only the second time that we've actually done a training on Zoom, but I think the important thing is just that we allow people to have the ability to engage and figure out what's going on and what are some of the things that we need to incorporate in our daily activities to help people understand where we are. So we want to talk about how can these messages help or hinder us from work that we do within the community with children and families or each other, and why would you say it's important for us to know that these messages that we take from the way that we were brought up into the world each day do affect the things, the decisions we make, our interaction with others. And once we are able to identify and sit back and say, if you ask yourself this question prior to going into specific meetings or having specific conversations with individuals, then you're always going to be that one step ahead, because you already know that if you are just trying to encourage people to believe in what you believe in, or your thoughts and processes, that is probably going to be a little bit difficult, right? Because we're coming into situations, conversations with preconceived notions or perceptions. And it's so difficult to not have those, when you're used to, I know at least for me, I lived at home till 25, once I graduated from college, I went back home, and then again, I'm under my parents' roof. So I have to abide by their rules, their regulations, and their beliefs. Because if they believe something, they don't give me an option to not believe in it. This is what we're going to do in our household, and these are the reasons why. But until you actually have the ability to understand other cultures and make yourself aware of how people feel, maybe just from some of the things that you talked about. I know that when we did this cultural awareness education here in our office, one of the things that was talked about was in regards to the different textures of different individuals' hair, and maybe the products that you may use for your hair. But one thing that was totally different that we learned just from talking to staff was, because we have very few minorities. There's a total of 80 staff here in our department in Livingston County, and we have a total of 5 minorities. And so it's kind of unknown territory. And actually, when I came to Livingston County, there was actually only 2 other minorities besides myself. So it was a huge culture change for people to, number one, have a director in the office every day, and number 2, have a director that looked different than they do. So it was something that I definitely wanted us to talk about. I wanted people to learn me. I wanted them to understand Jennifer Tate for the person she is, not what she looks like. But still in the forefront of my mind, I always thought, so prior to coming to work, I would make sure that certain clothing I did not wear, that I didn't wear my hair in specific ways. For example, braids. I didn't, that's just the easy fix, right? You can just put a cap on, go to bed, get up, take it off, and you're ready to rock and roll. You don't have to worry about getting up, taking that extra time to get ready. But I always knew that people would have a specific perception of me if I presented myself in a certain manner. And it was difficult for me to understand that and not be defensive, but want to educate people, because that was my goal. I wanted people to understand it's okay if people wear braids, or if certain individuals like to have a specific color other than the one that they were born with in their hair. Or one of the things that our staff talked about was people coming up to the minorities we had in the office and touching their hair, running their hands, saying, "Oh, I didn't realize your hair felt like this," or "Do you wash your hair every day?" Those types of things. And for me, it was difficult because you're going to get an entire different answer if you're asking me, right? Because the texture of my hair is kind of in between. So if I wash my hair, it's going to curl up. And if I blow dry it, then it's going to be straight. Because I'm a minority, doesn't mean that I automatically am going to put oil in my hair, or that I even have these specific things or perceptions that people here have. But if I can educate them and understand that it's probably not appropriate for you to walk up to a stranger, or even your first time meeting them, and run your fingers through their hair and ask them about the texture or how they care for their hair. That's probably not how you want to start out that conversation. You may, as you continue to engage and become comfortable, then you're here, we're in a setting where now we can talk about it. I want you to teach me and learn. I'm open to learning so that I can understand the differences and where we're going to go from here. And I want people to be able to be comfortable. I don't want it to be like it was when I came to Livingston, February of 2016. And I was the only minority director in Livingston County at that time. So I would walk into meetings. Obviously, people didn't know me because I was new to Livingston, and I was going to these meetings to introduce myself, so people could put a face with a name. But as soon as I would walk in the room, all conversation would stop. All eyes on me. But what I tried to do was take the positive from that, right? Because that's what my parents always taught me. There's positive in everything. So find it and go with the positive piece, and you're gonna see a change in some people's behavior. You're gonna see some people engage, and then there's gonna be others who are not open to it, and that's okay. So I always made sure when I did come into those meetings, I was, that I had confidence, that I had myself, that I was dressed professionally, but there were still times when that didn't work. I know that there was at least 2 occasions when I walked in a meeting. I was actually there to present on a program or a resource that I was bringing to Livingston County after finding out some of the needs that we had. And the response was that as soon as I walk in, the silence, and then everyone, all eyes on Tate. And then I actually had people say to me, I think you're in the wrong meeting.
So let me share as well that I was here when Jennifer came on board, and I witnessed many of these things, and it was shocking. And I think that for me, it's acknowledging a lot of the things that we've talked about here at the training. What are my biases? How can I make this situation better? How am I making it worse? What can I do? So Jennifer and I, we've had all sorts of great discussions, and I remember talking about these as they happened, and it's real, and we have to be very aware of how we do what we do, right? Our everyday. And that's tough. That's why this training is so important. This is the groundwork. We have to understand what our frame of reference is. We have to understand the lens in which we see through, because it colors all of our perceptions, all of our interactions. So it's the very basic piece. If you want to be more diverse, more supportive of people and minorities, and making people feel included, equity, creating equity when you are looking at hiring positions, you have to be aware of yourself. And then when you can start to influence people around you on how they can also look at what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I think that is also extremely sensitive for people to talk about. And we have to have those uncomfortable conversations. We have to. And we have to support each other because our community is better the more people that we have in it that are different from one another, the more diversity that we can embrace. What we're just creating is a better community, better ideas, better programs. We're making the work we do with children and families, we're making it better. We're making it more sound. We're making it more inclusive. And it's one of just the most important things that I've seen is to see how Jennifer opened up our community, opened up a lot of the people that we worked with. It was, I don't know, it's the magic of diversity. If you don't have the diversity, you'll never see it.
And it definitely is. It is challenging. And even, could you imagine walking into a meeting full of people and the first thing that they say to you is that, I think you're in the wrong meeting. So the first thing I have a suit on. I'm coming into a board meeting. I don't have on a jogging suit. I don't have on a baseball cap cocked to the back. And I didn't say, hey, I'm Tate, I'm here. No, I checked in, said, hi, I'm Jennifer Tate. Actually, I am supposed to be here. I'm actually second up on your agenda. So I'm just gonna have a seat. Let me know when you're ready for me to present. And I can remember I had 3 of my staff with me, and I sat in the row behind them just so we could kind of talk. You know, we're getting ready for the presentation and we want to have conversation. But they were so discombobulated because of the way that I was addressed coming in that they couldn't function. And to me, that was the day there that I said, you know what? I am a leader and I have to ensure that people accept me for who I am and not what I look like. And, you know, I remember having another experience actually with Courtney and myself. And we had 2 other staff with us, and we were walking into the courthouse, right? I had been a director here in Livingston for a year. I have been to the court multiple times. I meet with the judges on a monthly basis. I meet with the prosecutors. And so we have our badges on, right? And so there's 3 of my staff that walk in front of me to go through the metal detectors. They're all Caucasian. They had the same thing as I did, right? We all had suits on. We're here for a meeting. We all had our badges on. They put their purses on the conveyor belt. They walk right through, show their badge. I put my purse on the conveyor belt. I show my badge, and he says, well, I'm gonna need you to, can you open up your purse for me? I'm gonna need you to take off your belt when you go through this, walk through here, this. And I was so, there was so many things that I wanted to say, but I had to make sure that I stayed appropriate because I am in a leadership position, and I want my staff to see that all the time when you are faced with adversity, you don't have to respond negatively. But what that did was, because I didn't respond, I just did what he said. You know what I'm saying? I took off all of my jewelry. I took off my coat. I opened up my purse, everything he asked me to do. And so Courtney was the one who actually turned around and spoke up. And just sitting here, I see Courtney remembering that and the way that it made her feel. And she spoke up about that. And what that did, though, for me, it didn't make me give up. What it did was say, hey, I probably need to develop a relationship with Sheriff Murphy. And that's exactly what I did. I developed a relationship with Sheriff Murphy, the under sheriff. And after that, we had a conversation, and those behaviors that were displayed was something that I didn't have to go through again. But it had happened on 2 or 3 occasions, and I thought maybe it's just because there's somebody new here, maybe because they didn't know me. I don't come often, but I do come at least once or twice a month. But it was just important, and I think it's so important for others to see, because until you're able to understand how that makes people feel, and you can put yourself in that predicament and say, wow, if that was me, or if it was the other way, how would I feel, and where would we go from there? So, the messages and the things that we share that really want everybody to walk away from this conversation today is the things that we know, right? We know that the world is influenced by the messages we receive, whether it's from your family, friends, through the schools, or associations that we've had with other people. And when we are able to recognize this, that the different influences and the messages that we receive definitely have a huge piece to do with in regards to what our thoughts are, our perceptions, and how we're going to interact with people. And that is what is going to make the difference. When you can understand and you know that you want people to be treated the same, you want everybody, there's rules. I get it, 100%. Expectation, structure for everybody. But what I do believe is that should always be the same. And I'm so thankful now to have come to Livingston County and have had these experiences so that I have the ability to be able to help people understand how that makes an individual feel when they are addressed like that. Or, because your first thought, if a person walks into the meeting and they look different from you, I would expect them to do the thing they did for everybody else behind me and say, how can I help you? How can I help you today? Instead of just automatically saying, oh, she's in the wrong meeting. So I hope that everybody understands that. And as we continue to move forward and have these conversations in the community, that we know that we're open and willing and have the ability, and that people are going to be honest and transparent, and that you're going to know how the messages that you have or you share in regards to other people, how it's going to make a difference in the decisions that you make, or how it's going to affect the people that you interact with. So at this point, I'm just challenging everybody to make sure that you're aware of what your biases are and try to make sure that they don't show up in your daily work. Utilize your biases as a way of educating yourself and making sure that you have a good understanding of individuals from different cultures, religions, and social habits. Because just because people choose to do things that are different from you, whether it's the way they wear their hair, the way they speak, the type of car they drive, or the way they interact with others, it has a lot to do with the person. And so one thing that I always like to do is say that what people speak is what comes from their heart. So that's how they're feeling. And maybe sometimes you just need to share, educate people, and help them understand that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask a person, what would they like to be referred as? Or how would they like you to address them? Like, those are ways that are appropriate to engage and have those conversations with people and be able to move forward. And at the end of the day, as long as we know that together we can move mountains, and as long as we're coming to the table and addressing these issues collaboratively as a whole, with people that look different from us, make different choices from us, that we're opening up the arena for us to continue to grow and become a diverse community. Thank you. And I'll turn it back over to Nicole now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Courtney and Jennifer, for sharing your time with us today. I really want to thank you, Jennifer, for creating a brave space. I think that so often that is what stops us from having these conversations, is allowing ourselves to be brave and vulnerable and speaking to folks about our experiences, being truly honest and forethought with our conversation. And we can only learn when we're uncomfortable, when we are not aware of exactly the information that's coming towards us, right? If we're anticipating and we know the conversation that we're having, we're not learning anything. And so for us to learn, we have to be in an uncomfortable and brave space. And I appreciate you setting the tone for creating that brave space and being willing to share your experiences with us. I think there's some great messages, some great use of words that really go back to the goals behind this online learning series for the Livingston Diversity Council, our Learn, Love Livingston. We know that so many of us love our community and really wish and want for better and want for more. And we have the capacity as we learn to do better with each other. And using that collaboration, using the education, using empowerment and allowing space, making space and inviting space for people to take and share those experiences is how we're going to do better with that. So I very much appreciate you laying the foundation for our learning series. And I'm very grateful for all of you that were able to join us today. We do have our next series will be coming up. These will always occur on the third Wednesday of the month at 10:30 a.m. and via Zoom. And so our next session will be held on Wednesday, February 17th at 10:30. They're usually scheduled for about an hour and a half. And then once the recording is done, we will make sure that it is uploaded to our YouTube channel. So you can share that link with folks, let people know that if they've missed the session, they can always jump on and join us at the recording on the YouTube channel. But with that, I again appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will look forward to seeing you next month. Take care, everybody. Be safe today and enjoy the day. Bye-bye.